All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining this. This is our first attempt of sharing some wisdom from our manufacturing talent acquisition community. And if you haven't seen it yet, we did an article last week that just asked a handful of our TA leaders, what are your 2024 recruiting resolutions? And we got 7 leaders to kind of give their answers on various things like what's your biggest focus for this year, what recruiting metrics are you paying attention to, what recruiting channels are you leaning into more, or which ones are you're cutting back on. And we got some great answers. So if you haven't checked out that article yet, I put a link in the chat to do that. But one of those manufacturing TA leaders was Bill Chouinard from Rebuild Manufacturing. Bill, can you hear me okay? There you go. Excellent. And I'll do a quick intro for you. Bill's the head of talent at Rebuild Manufacturing, which is a fascinating company that you can tell us about in a second. But previously to that, Bill was the director of TA at Cengage, which is a ed tech company. So pretty cool how you've come into the manufacturing space. But as we were talking about a couple days ago, Rebuild is not your average, manufacturing startup. So give us a sense of what Rebuild does, and then what does your team look like there?
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Patrick. And Rebuild is a interesting manufacturing company in that we're only 3 years old. We have been very busy in that 3 years. The first 18 months really were spent acquiring other businesses to help us get a jump start on our strategy. So, kind of very simply put, we acquired a number of traditional manufacturing businesses, kind of in the small to mid-sized category. And then kind of equally on the other side of the fence, a number of engineering services firms who either do engineering consulting or who themselves were engineering equipment for manufacturing purposes. And so, and it gets a lot more specific from there. But, ultimately, Rebuild is really kind of about delivering advanced manufacturing solutions here in the US using a concept that we call brain to box, which is really kind of, if you think about it, the whole idea of design all the way through to production and go to market, and being able to do that for our customers. And so we're on a kind of an evolutionary part of this journey right now, and we're growing, we're young. There's a lot of work to be done in order to deliver on the larger vision and mission here. And, some of that requires taking certain steps, the acquisition part of the strategy being the first, and kind of exciting new inflection point in our trajectory is taking place right now in a town called New Kensington. It's just outside of Pittsburgh, where we are in the process of renovating an old Alcoa smelting plant and turning it into 175,000 square feet of advanced manufacturing capability, which brings the scale to what we're looking to do. So a lot of the acquisitions were really about getting us started, kind of bringing the technology, the enabling technology into our family of businesses. And now with the New Kensington investment, we're kind of taking the next big step into what really will be the future of Rebuild, which are more factories like New Kensington throughout the US that allow us to produce at scale the type of hard tech that the US really needs to be able to manufacture.
Yeah, and I said it's not your average manufacturing, startup. You have some super ambitious founders, right? Jeff Wilke was like the number 2 guy at Amazon for a long time, and Miles, the CEO there, seems like one of the smartest people on the planet. So, I mean, those guys could do anything. They could raise money for any company, but to do it with the purpose of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. is super cool. And frankly, I think like more people should hear about Rebuild and what you guys are doing. But to put you as you have the label as the head of talent to help, turn this dream into fruition here, it's got to be a lot of pressure in a sense.
Well, it's exciting. I think, pressure makes diamonds, and we're all about making cool things. So I think that, if you're not interested in diving in and taking on this challenge, Rebuild would be a bit of a terrifying place. I think we've been moving at a pretty aggressive pace, but one of the things that really drew me to this opportunity and to Rebuild, and I've been here more or less since the beginning. It's all about kind of the legacy of being able to reestablish a foothold for manufacturing here in the U.S., to create the types of jobs that we want to create in advanced manufacturing in the U.S. Those types of jobs have been deteriorating for 3 decades now, and so there's a real passion play here for anybody who is in the talent space and enjoys building teams and enjoys creating opportunities. And that's what really drew me to it, and the challenge of it all, is something that we're tackling with a really strong team, with some great resources and some really pretty terrific partnership from the businesses, all of whom, share this vision, share this mission in some way, shape, and form. And I say that because a lot of what we're talking about doing right now is pretty ambitious and aspirational. And so various aspects of the strategy are at different points in their maturity, including the talent function. And some of the topics that we'll chat about here in a minute, they don't, my approach or my concerns don't seem overly sophisticated for such a big challenge, because we're young. And I think we need to really do some basic blocking and tackling and get some of the foundational elements of recruitment and retention right before we try to get too fancy with what we're trying to accomplish.
So to give everyone context, like what does the team structure look like today?
Sure. So today we have 2 dedicated recruiters, so senior recruiters internally. We have a talent program manager who focuses exclusively on developing workforce solutions, so pipelines into the more manufacturing heavy side of our business. We've got a spinoff company that came up early in our life cycle that's now standing up its own talent function to focus exclusively on that business. And then, depending on kind of the point in our history you look at, we've deployed various solutions such as RPO. We've used contract recruiters for fixed periods of time when we've had, kind of increases in demand. And we will always look to leverage specialty third-party agencies for really specific roles, or even, retained search. So we've got a number of tools in the tool bag from a human capital standpoint. And then, like anybody, we're really focused on building out the tech stack that supports that team in whatever form to the best of their ability. And for me, that really is right now a lot about force multiplication, because when you strip us back to kind of our bare bones, we're a small but mighty team focused on trying to make roughly 250 to 275 hires a year right now, and in year 1, and now just in what we closed out year 2. But those numbers will grow, and will grow significantly. The new Kensington plant that I mentioned alone is 300 hires over the next 2.5 years. So that's going to create a real demand for the team. And then beyond that, as we start to scale and new business lands, there are going to be a lot of moments where we really need to hit the accelerator. And there's just going to have to be some logic behind how we intelligently build the team from there.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy year for you. That's for sure.
Which is good. In
Good.
this, right? I think anybody in this function would say busy is good, because the alternative is not so great for talent.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. So when we asked the first question in that article, we asked what your 2024 recruiting resolution, meaning like what's the one thing you're focused on improving? And the answer you gave, you said you're focused on driving continued improvement throughout the full recruiting cycle, but with a key focus on candidate quality. And candidate quality came up multiple times in those answers. I think 4 out of the 7 TA leaders put that or mentioned it. I guess, yeah. Why'd you give that answer, and talk a bit more about what improving candidate quality like means to you? Because obviously it can mean a lot of things.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think that's right. Like quality is the great unknown. How do you measure it? What does it mean? To some extent, I think that changes in terms of how you measure it from place to place and how you look at it. But for me, really, at the end of the day, improving the life cycle in general, continuous improvement in the recruitment life cycle, leading towards more quality hires, is really about being competitive and kind of dialing in our process and making sure that we are tight. We've got a number of different companies, all of whom have been acquired with different processes, different attitudes, different cultures. So there's a lot of kind of different balls in the air depending on who we're dealing with and who we're hiring for. And so, kind of mainstreaming as much of that as we can without having a big impact on culture is a huge part of that, kind of, continuous improvement of the recruiting life cycle. It's being fast where we can without risking the quality of the process and making sure that we're not losing anything important in the process as a result of trying to move quickly, because time kills all deals. We want to be the first person to speak to that engineer, speak to that composites technician, because there's a lack of depth in a lot of the areas that we're actively recruiting for. And so, you really have to be, sharp when you engage folks. And so we can't afford to take a lot of time or be sloppy in our approach. So we're going to spend a lot of time making sure that our interactions are meaningful, that, we really take a kind of concerted effort to make sure that candidates enjoy the time that they spend with us and that they feel like it's meaningful. And ultimately, I think doing that, it brings people to the table that appreciate the process. And so who you end up as part of your final slate and your selection process are generally people who appreciate what you're doing, appreciate your vision and your mission if you've done a good job at selling it, and appreciate that your process is respectful of their time and energy. And so those folks are generally, I think, the very best types of candidates that you can kind of bring to the table. And then the process itself has to be, very good at discerning value in their capability. And so we're going to continue to look at ways to, assess people effectively and dial in on the things that matter, and spend a lot of time thinking about, kind of those basic IO psychology fundamentals that really help you kind of get down to what matters.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Like 4 of the answers had to do with like candidate quality, and then the other 3 had to do with improving time to hire. And those are, I guess, from the outside in, somewhat at odds with each other, right? You either like take your time and make sure the quality's good, or you speed up knowing you're going to have some misses, but improve that metric. Or, is that not really the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are definitely not mutually exclusive. I think that, if you think about where time gets wasted and drives up time to fill, time to hire, whatever you want to call it. It's not the interview itself, right? It's not the touch point where you should be gathering actionable data. It's all the connective tissue in between. It's the scheduling. It's the, how long does it take the hiring manager to get back to the recruiter, or for the recruiter to evaluate the notes from an interview, or, like all those connective tissues are where the time gets wasted. And so, when I talk about streamlining, kind of tightening up that full cycle recruitment process. It's looking at all that connective tissue and stripping away as much wasted time as possible. I'm a bit of a broken record about the fact that, I use three numbers. I say 4, 8, 3. You should have 4 touches of a candidate. You should waste no more than 8 hours of their time. And when you start to engage them, you ought to be able to close out your time with them in 3 weeks. And I think if you can do that, it's really hard for other competitive talent teams to beat you to the punch. And so you really got to work hard with your team to have them think through, all right, if we're going to stick to that, how do we make the 4 touches meaningful? What do we fit into those 8 hours, and how do we get from start to finish in 3 weeks? And there's a ton of stuff in there, that's just process-based, technology-based, attitude-based that you need to just keep drilling on with folks so that they can do those things, have it be realistic, have them still be able to, do their day job, and not have it be such a heavy lift that it's unsustainable. So to me, if you can do those things, time to fill kind of takes care of itself, right? And then, when you're spending time, when those 8 hours with them, within those 4 touches, that's really meaningful time. How you capture the interactions, using scorecards, sharing that data, kind of in a timely manner, but in a sequence where you're not engaging levels of bias. All that stuff is kind of what goes into the soup.
That's a super cool tagline. So it's 4 touches per candidate, up to 8 hours. So you're putting a limit on the number of hours that you can use up of a candidate's time, and then like a 3-week cycle, recruiting cycle, essentially.
So what people typically call time to hire, right? So from the moment they apply and you kind of engage them to when you cycle them off, either be it disposition or making an offer, you ought to be able to kind of figure out a way to do that in 3 weeks.
Cool. I like that. Very cool. Let's get to another one of your taglines, I guess, so to speak, your 80/20 rule for your team, which I thought was interesting and aligns well with your resolution of improving candidate quality, because God knows you're not going to improve candidate quality if you just sit back and rely on what's coming in through job boards or what have you. So talk about your 80/20 rule.
Yeah, so not your typical 80/20 rule. We spend 80% of our time focused on direct sourcing, or what other people might call passive search. It's reaching out and actively trying to find the people that fit the persona that we're hiring for. And we put a lot of time and energy into developing that model so that we know who we're looking for. But the fact of the matter is, Rebuild is 3 years old. I'd be surprised if anyone kind of on the stream with us right now had ever heard of us before. And I think that's that's something that we hope will change over time. But right now, we don't have the benefit of being a marquee name in the business world in general, or within the manufacturing world. So we need to do a lot of education around who we are, what our our vision is, what our mission is, what it's like to work here. And in some cases, that is also aspirational. So some of these things aren't even really known to us. We're evolving. So you got to spend a lot of time selling that. So we spend 80% of our time and energy going out, looking for people and pitching the roles, pitching the company, and relying very, very little on inbound applicant traffic, because we get a fair amount of it. It's increasing. That's all good, as a result of the efforts we're making. But what we find is that the match rate there is really low, which is not atypical for other companies too. But going out to Indeed and posting a job just means that we're going to drive quantity and not necessarily quality. And so we're trying to focus our time and energy on the qualitative aspect of candidate attraction. And that means we've got to go do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, it's analogous to like account-based marketing and sales, where you're being intentional about who you reach out to and intentional about the outbound motion, not necessarily obviously just relying on what comes in. But it's got to be a tough thing to monitor with your team, or to keep encouraging. How do you keep drilling into them that, hey, we got to be going outbound? It's even with like a sales team, it's very hard to get them to prospect all the time and not just work on the deals that are coming to them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll think about the numbers that go into hiring 260, 270 people a year. Right now, it's actually not that hard to spend, some time each month looking at all the hires we made and drilling into the sourcing for those hires, and being able to back my way into really are they coming from the places we need them to come from? Are we doing the, kind of the things that we're doing? If I see that, in a given month, 50% of our hires are coming from the applicant pool, the first question is, were they really well received by the hiring team? If they were, good for us. I mean, it's not to say that you can't have a great month where you get great applicant flow, and not all applicants are a bad match. But if you find that the process took a little while, and ultimately that they were looking for X but settled for Y, that to me is really kind of the worst case scenario. It's like, they just gave up, and some level of kind of bias, urgency bias took over, and they just were willing to put somebody in the role that did not exactly fit the bill, which is not good, right? Like that's, over time, what that does, it erodes confidence in your customer, the hiring teams, that the talent in the recruiting function can deliver exactly what they're looking for. And so, we'll have those conversations as we evaluate the monthly hires and see where they're coming from. But that said, there are plenty of tools in the tech stack right now that help us deliver on that 80%. And here's where I'll do the, kind of the pump for FactoryFix. One of the most effective tools that we had this year was your platform. So, as I mentioned earlier, the jobs we're hiring for are not out there in ready, deep supply. And specifically in the manufacturing sector, when we're looking for machinists, technicians, people with really specific technical skills, or even basic technical aptitude, in the areas where we have businesses right now, the pool's pretty shallow. And so going out and using some traditional tools like LinkedIn to try to find those folks, or relying on Indeed or ZipRecruiter and some of the other job boards, has really proven to drive quantity, but not quality, as I mentioned. It has us spending a lot of time looking for somebody that might be okay, but not great. And since we've engaged with you, the numbers of hires that we've been able to make that are received as great matches for the roles we have has skyrocketed. And from 2022, where we had some really significant challenges around a couple of roles specifically that I can think of in South Carolina, to 2023, that contrast is stark, and in a very positive way. And so, we've doubled down for this year with you all. I'm encouraging, the rest of the team to kind of push around the edges of what might be considered your core competency, to try to identify other roles, and really lean into the platforms that are focused on areas that serve our industry, because not all of them do. They're designed to serve all industries, which is helpful in some cases, but not always as helpful as you want it to be.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, our goal, we have to win at our vertical, right? Like we pick one. We're not like Indeed where we get to sell to everyone. But we have to lean into that as an advantage and really be better at the curation piece and the matching and the screening. So no, I appreciate that. I appreciate, like, FactoryFix getting mentioned in the article several times, which was very cool to see. I did not try to prompt that, but you said something.
Patrick, I think, for me, we get bombarded by inbound from recruiting agencies, technology vendors. I know everybody that's in my position, regardless of the size of the company, knows exactly what that looks like. And, I'm a big believer that when something works, you should share that with other people. And part of the reason I responded to the survey, kind of wanted to get on here with you today is because I think you guys are doing a great job. I think you've found a way to deliver on a market that is desperately important to us, and whatever I can do to share that, because we want this ecosystem in manufacturing to grow. We don't want to be the only successful manufacturing company in the US. We want to see other companies thriving around us, because that's how we win at this domestically. So this is a great product, great platform. Other people should take a long, hard look at it if they're not already using it.
I appreciate it. And manufacturing is like somewhat unique in that way, where everyone's kind of rooting for each other, and maybe the biggest competitors to manufacturing talent aren't other manufacturers, right? It could be the gig economy, Uber, DoorDashes of the world, or I mean, you can make $100K a year running a Chipotle. Like, there's a lot of other competitors, so that's quite cool, and it's maybe one of the few bipartisan issues left in Washington is everyone wants strong manufacturing.
Yeah.
So, all right, last question I have for you, and it kind of caught me off guard a little bit, but when we were talking a couple of days ago, I asked you about recruiting metrics that you're monitoring, and I somewhat expected you to say we monitor them all religiously. We have this entire recruiting funnel, and we look at each metric and try to improve it. But that's not what you said.
Yeah, I think recruiting metrics, metrics in general in business, I think are to some extent inside baseball. I spent most of my career as a GM running businesses, and I've never been a metrics first person. I think metrics are derivative of effort, and so for me, the thing that I'm really focused on is the satisfaction of my customer. So if I've got 12 businesses, and when I talk to the GMs, they feel like they're getting what they need, then I'm going to be generally happy, and not hyper focused on any particular number within our stack of KPIs. It's not to say that we don't have them. We do, and we look at them. And the way I kind of pitch this to my team is, even if everybody said they were 100% satisfied, we would use these metrics to find a way to get better over time, and look for ways we could improve our process. If we have a customer that is telling us they're not satisfied, or that there's an area where we're challenged, then these metrics are part of the business case we make, not only for ourselves, but to the business as to how we improve that, right? Because most metrics in recruitment are shared metrics. There are very few that recruiting owns alone. And so, at the end of the day, if you can keep your customer, the hiring teams happy, satisfied, chances are a lot of the stuff that goes into driving those KPIs is already working. And so if you've got fundamental needs to improve in a certain area, like time to fill, to go back to my earlier kind of anecdote about connective tissue, that's the stuff that gets addressed by working with the hiring team. And so if they're already pleased with you and your function in general, then it's easy to go to them and work on improving those things. If they're not, and some of that stuff is broken or there's friction, then you need to stop and you need to kind of blow things up. And we did that, actually. We did that this year, because we kind of came through the door as the parent company looking to deliver a shared service to all these businesses who had never had the kind of recruiting support that we were looking to provide. And not all of them wanted it, and we just assumed they'd be like, wow, this is great, something new and free to help us. And that wasn't the case. So we actually took Lean, kind of as a tool, and specifically A3 thinking, and we applied that to our entire recruitment process earlier in 2023 to get a better sense of what people really wanted out of us. And we, kind of really, we're hyper focused on the connective tissue and ways in which to make that glide, easier. And it worked very well. And we saw really tremendous improvements in our time to fill and our cost per hire, and general satisfaction. Those things all got better in 2023 as a result of spending time talking about it. But again, we started by having these conversations with our customers, not by digging into the KPIs and looking for ways to just slice days off here and do other things. So that's really why I say, lead with other things, lead with satisfaction, lead with taking care of your customer, and the KPIs should take care of themselves, or will be much easier to improve if you have that starting point built.
That makes a ton of sense. Well, these 30 minutes flew by, so I can't thank you enough for your support and hopping on here and sharing your wisdom with everyone. So thanks to you, Bill. Thanks for everyone that joined live. If you didn't, we'll send this out to you. And thanks everyone for your support. Really appreciate it.